Okay, so what we want to do now is set up Maya to export out our camera with VueSync and then export out our geo to Vue as OBJs. So you can see here I just made a simple test scene with a camera, a sphere, cube, and a cone, and a ground plane. I've added two directional lights just so when we render you can see a little more shading around the objects. But first things first, we're in Maya. What we want to make sure is our preferences are correct for Vue. So go under Window, Settings and Preferences, Preferences, go to Settings, and you can see right here, if your Maya is not set up this way, by default Maya is for centimeters, put it to meters, and then click Save. So now Maya is working in a meter space. And then we'll go over to Vue. We'll make sure that Vue is looking at things as meters. And this is mainly for the scaling of the atmosphere within Vue. So basically, I've already got the VueSync plugin set up on my shelf. But basically, you can type it in under the Mel script here, capital V for Vue, and then capital S on sync. Sync with an H at the end for synchronization, and then a semicolon at the end. And then basically when you enter on this Mel script, you will get the Vue Infinite Synchronizer. Now you can put this to your shelf in Maya and then save it, or just keep typing this command in the Mel script. And then basically what you can see that is mimicked here in your outliner is all the cameras in your scene, and then any kind of lights that you have in your scene. So you can export out of Maya to Vue using this plugin, cameras and lights. What we care about right now is just the camera. So you select the camera and click export. But before we do that though, we want to make sure the render settings for the camera is correct. And my camera right now is set up as a 1K camera. So if you go into render settings, which is this clapboard right here, and then make sure your width and height is 1K, and what you can see down here is your device aspect ratio should be 1, and your pixel aspect ratio should be 1. The pixel aspect is important for later when we're in Photoshop to make sure everything is at square pixels. And basically with that, you're good to go and you export out your file. Navigate to your area. I'm already where I need to be for what my images to be. You need to always change the file type, and the .dat format is on the way bottom. So it's the Vue Synchro Data .dat. So select that, name your camera how you want it. The one that I exported was basically this one right here, camera 1 meter scale version 2. And then basically save as. And then you have your camera. So now you can close this. And the next thing is you just select your geometry, and under File, Export Selection. Navigate to your file. Lost my area, so I'm going to go Teaching, Studio Arts, Week 7, Vue, VueSync. And then make sure it's an OBJ export. And then I've already exported these, but I did them all individually. You can select all and then export, but when you import into Vue, it'll come as a group, and I typically like to have them separated. So that is basically it for Maya, except that I want to do a test render. So what we're going to do is click right here, Render Current Frame, and then down here you get a simple render of your Maya file. You get a nice little outline of your geo file, save image. And what I typically do is I like to mimic the naming convention. So I'm doing a test render, 1K at meters. This is the Maya image. And then save, and I typically save as TIFFs. So now we can go over to Vue. And before you get started, what you want to make sure for Vue is under File Options, Units and Coordinates. You want to make sure the default display is Vue units. One Vue unit is 1 meter. And then you can basically click Apply Settings to Current Scene if you haven't, if you already had the scene open, and then click OK. So now, theoretically, everything should be a 1-to-1. We've got meters in Maya. We've told Vue to look at things in meters based on its Vue units. So what do we want to do? We want to import our objects, which is basically a file import object, very straightforward. Import your objects. And then the trickier part is you want to get your camera. So under animation, import synchronization data, and then you want to find that data. So for us, it's the VU scale 2, open, nothing happens. And you can see everything immediately got small. That's because the camera isn't looking at anything yet. By default, let's say right now, there's nothing in here except your geo that you've imported. So you want your camera to line up to where your scene file is. So there's 3 tabs in this object parameter. You want the rightmost one. Under motion, go down to synchronized, select your camera. The default, I don't know why, scale is 50, but type 1. And then now you can see everything looks like it is in Maya. Now sometimes this dialog box doesn't open. Sometimes what I do is I just widget it, and here you can see it updated. And then now basically your scene should be the same, but we want to do a test render. So if you right click on the camera, this gives you the render options. So we can keep it preview. Typically it's defaulted to render in main window. I like to keep it to screen. You'll see in a second what it'll do is it'll give a pop-out window for the render versus taking over this dialog box panel for the render, and that's what render in main view is. This is your main view for VU. Now if you look over here under your render settings, it has the settings that you had in Maya, 1K by 1K, so you should be good. You can click OK to close this, or from here you can even click render, and now we'll get the render in VU, and you get a nice little dialog right here giving you the timeline for how long it's going to take. Done. Click OK. There's some post-render things you can turn on and off if you want. Just going to click OK for now. And then what you can basically do is right-click, save image, and then we'll name it the same kind of naming. Right here I've already done it. Test render 1K 1 meter VU. TIFF. You want to make sure that these are off. Add render info bar to image. Save render info to log file. Typically you just want to save only rendered area. Save. I'm not going to replace, so I'm just going to cancel. And then now what you need to do is just go into Photoshop and make sure everything lines up. So we go in here. There's my 2 files. I'm going to open them. And since our control is Maya, I will typically right click, duplicate layer into Maya, click OK. I don't care about this one now. And then you just want to make sure that they're the same. And sometimes what I do to make it easier is I make a mask on the uppermost image, fill the little outline that I've drawn black, unclip the mask, and now I can move the mask around. And then now you're basically judging edge to edge, and everything is looking pretty good. So now you know that your file is synced properly, and now you can go and start working in VU, do whatever renders you want, and you know that you have a one-to-one to Maya, and then you can bring your elements into Photoshop and paint on top of them, for your projections or whatnot.